On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Jennifer Rettig. She is the Chief People Officer at Pendo. JR is going to talk to us about what it means to kind of focus on stakeholder and management expectation, focusing on the C suite succession planning, removing subjectivity around what strong leadership is. And I think that's a real hard one. I think we're going to try to dive in and cover a little bit more, but I don't know how far we'll get. And I'm super excited to cover some of this stuff with you, JR. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So before we start, I want to ask you right off the top, because one thing that is going to come up in this, and I think it's going to be key for us to understand, is when we talk about leadership and we're talking about strong leaders and we're talking about, a lot of these sub things that we're going to be talking about, defining what successful leadership looks like, it sounds really trivial, but I actually think it is very important because every company has a different definition of what that leadership should look like.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Every company, I think every stage of company, it really does depend on where you're at. For example, I'm at a fast growing, late stage, emerging growth startup right now, and when we've looked across, leaders that have been successful, leaders who have maybe not been so successful, right? What were some of those qualities that counted, that mattered, and folks who had amazing track records of being strong leaders, perhaps in large organizations or companies that have just like even in enterprise SaaS that have been wildly successful can come in to our environment and fail, right? And we would never see that coming or think about that if you looking at their LinkedIn, their resume, even in some instances of, hey, tell in an interview, tell me about a time when, or the stories that they might tell. You have to get to that next level about what is most important for leadership at Pendo, right? Or at blank at this moment in time. And I think that we've learned it, unfortunately, a few times the hard way. And after the fact, yet we've utilized that learning, right, to apply to, okay, for example, we're going to be embarking upon a C-level search here fairly soon, and we're really talking about even the nuances of leadership within that organization, which is relatively smaller, right, than some of the other pieces of our organizations, right? So even within a company, what leadership means could mean something different based on size of that stage. Where's that organization at? What role are they going to play in the next phase of our growth and business? So you could get one size does not fit all, right, within that. And I think you just have to keep asking questions till you get to the heart of it.
When you are looking at, I like that one size doesn't fit all, big component of that is stakeholder and expectation management. Because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but people do come into the process with maybe a list or preconceived notion of who might be a fit. And obviously, as talent and people leaders, the job is to make sure that door stays wide open so that you can actually go through and assess properly. When you are working with leadership teams and you're trying to make sure that they stay open minded, because obviously one size doesn't fit all, from you mentioned department to department, company to company. What are your thoughts there? How do you approach that?
But you definitely don't want to limit your top of funnel in any search, right? We again have the situation of what is this leader? You have to look at the leader as not only a leader of the organization that they're coming in for, but as a partner to their what we call, right, a first team. We operate with that principle at Pendo. So your first team is actually your peers. So if you're a member of the vice president group, your peers, the other vice presidents, are really your first team, not your team that reports to you. So I do think that engaging those stakeholders as well. Hey, what do you expect? What do you need from your business? Let's say you're running, whatever, you're running customer success, and we're bringing in another, another vice president, another organization. What does the vice president of customer success need from this leader in order to be successful? What are they looking for, right? And we make sure we get that survey. So it's not just the managers or the team, right? But you have to look out into the organization, because that, to me, that ability to collaborate, to drive cross-functional success, especially in organizations that are growing and that are our size, it's key. And if that does not exist, then you're not going to be successful. So you have to sort of almost like survey the landscape, and in that top of funnel, provide kind of that wide list of expectations, and then we can disqualify, right? You never want to get disqualified right before someone even enters the funnel. Give us the opportunity to sell and then perhaps disqualify later.
One of the hardest things to me, I could be wrong, but one of the hardest things to me is when you do want to hire for a leadership role, subjectivity is a difficult thing to control. When we're down at the IC level, you know what? There's always an assessment you can fall back to, I feel. When it comes to leaders, that subjectivity, keeping it in control, making sure, and I don't know if there's a way to being 100% objective. I think that's a tough one, but keeping subjectivity to minimum is an ongoing battle. How have you seen some of the techniques to make sure that as people are going through the process at a leadership level, that even if there is subjectivity, there's some checks and balances?
Yeah, I think there's two really important things that we've learned along the way and we tend to implement in practice. I think you recognize within some of let's say there's an executive interview panel. Not that we tend to be pretty close and pretty direct and transparent at our company. So who can be the most objective here, right? Who actually, and who maybe has a little bit of an agenda because this is a really important hire, right? Or because of whatever may be going on within that relationship between their organizations at the time. I think you just have to call it out and get it all out on the table, or else we're not going to have honest discussions, right? About what we're really looking for. Maybe what we had before in a role, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need now? So identifying, yes, those who may be able to be more objective and those who may have a little more skin in the game or an agenda. What is it that they're looking for, and what are they going to bring to that conversation? I think the other is, as much as you can bring a little science into it and have people fill out a rubric, 3 to 5 points of a scorecard, and assign a numerical value that allows you to then compare candidates, it really has helped us within those must haves, right? Ranking people, and you can definitely see someone scored a 4.5 versus a 4.25, and let's talk about that and what that looks like. And some of that is the difference maker in the end. So I think those two things, open and honest conversation up front and bringing a little science into the art, reduces that subjectivity.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, obviously introducing some science into the art. I think I like that. What are some of I guess, the adjustments and processes you've seen to kind of incorporate some of the science that have worked in the past for you?
Even within, I do think we've learned the actual numeric piece was the biggest one that we got down to, of how are we going to score someone? What is the weighting of this scoring, right? This conversation around what if you've got 5 things we're looking for in a candidate, are they all equal? Right? Are you ranking them all as 20% of the score? Or let's really, again, as a group or as a hiring manager and maybe a small core of folks, really talk about how are we going to differentiate, right? Is it more important that this person understand how to go out and, create a category where, and then create a new TAM, go after new business in a new market? Or is it more important that they know how to lead a team, right? And have a track record of success of running a large team, a large global organization or enterprise? Is that a must have or a nice to have? So I think we spend a lot of time, Amir, before everyone wants to get to candidates, right? That's one surefire way for this to go awry, is getting to candidates, having this first candidate, and then comparing everyone to that person, right? This is our ideal profile, because it's going to be subjective no matter what. So I try to get my teams to understand that we're not going to get to candidates for maybe a month, right? And that's really uncomfortable. Nobody likes that. But in order to make sure we're telling our story correctly, we have our scoring, our interview, our candidate experience. What's it going to look like before we have them in the hand, that we're ready to move them through? It's so much more important. And I think we've learned that the hard way, because everyone's got a referral or everyone knows someone that would be perfect And that can send us off into, a real bad direction or a double back later.
Hmm, that's very true. I was going to ask you something about that. You mentioned not starting candidates too soon. As you're spending time and building, that baseline, understanding the requirements, how important is it, or do you, maybe both questions, you can answer whichever one's applicable to you, deal with acceptance criteria so that we might know, hey, this person, this candidate is hitting these marks and this is how close they are. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, that is. I think we do challenge each other a lot and ask a lot of questions. So, not only to let's say that you'll meet someone, you can, I do, like, obviously I want qualitative feedback along with quantitative, making sure those things correlate, right? That the qualitative backs up sort of how you're scoring someone, and then actually in a debrief conversation having, okay, tell me more about that. You scored them really high here, right? Or but there's not a lot of content there. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Again, that structure can allow just for rich conversations and for kind of getting at these biases or the subjectivity or whatever might be, in there that we would have to make sure we're getting sort of the most fair and balanced look. Beyond having conversations, is there more that we do, right? Do you have someone present? Do we ask an executive to do work or like some kind of a work product? Is there a whiteboard exercise? What does that look like? What are we looking to send? And if you're going to do that, the answer that you have to come up with is what does success look like in that then? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to get out of that so that you can, you can score that appropriately if that's what we're trying to do. And then even though we're talking about the science and the removing subjectivity, there is something to chemistry, intangibles, the language people use, the way that they interact that maybe you're going to get at in a dinner, right? Or a meeting otherwise offsite. That so I think trying to have examples of how someone operated in an interview, in action, presenting or whiteboarding or sharing ideas, as well as then out and in the world together or traveling together. We spend a lot of time together, so much time. Can we be successful in that amount of time that we're spending away from our families and with each other? I think these are all important factors to consider.
I guess a follow-up question to this, because I think as you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, knowing what to look for. And you mentioned obviously comparison, especially when it comes to areas that subjectivity does creep in. You mentioned having multiple candidates and trying to decide between candidates, because then you're trying to weigh certain factors of subjectivity weighed against other subjectivity factors. So it's not as easy. It sounds, as I'm saying it, I'm like, boy, that doesn't sound so good. But is there a notion, or maybe there should be a notion that, especially in leadership, you have candidate A, you might have candidate B, you have candidate C, but decide on candidate A on their own merits. If you like them, hire them. Stop looking at B and C, or go, is B or C better? Because if that person hits the marks on everything, it doesn't matter what doors B and C are. You should actually shut them, because then you don't have any of this inception of, oh, well, we could have, or well, we did kind of think about that.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, right? I think my caution within that too is to ensure that you have seen perhaps a diverse slate of candidates that we're considering folks that might just not, why was someone such a slam dunk? Like, are we really, like, again, are our biases there that there's something that's making them that slam dunk? So let's challenge that notion and ensure that we're not, yes, they meet all of our criteria, but if we meet other people, we can actually reinforce and calibrate, I suppose, right? At worst, to ensure that you're just not in love, right? Irrationally in love, perhaps even with all of those things in place. I would be, lying to say that we haven't done that, or I haven't done that in my career. You've met one person, you go through all of it, and you hire that person. Absolutely, that does happen. right? I think ideally, especially if you're going to spend a lot of money, even with an external agency, or a lot of time and run a search, make sure that you have actually at that moment in time considered, all candidates possible. And you're thinking even, we're thinking outside the box about what could this be, right? As opposed to maybe, just challenging yourself. And our employees hold us accountable there. I mean, I have to say, right? They will challenge, right? Like they want to know what the process looked like. They want to meet candidates, right? Our employees, leaders, whoever that might be. We are very, very transparent. We will give updates on how we're doing on executive searches, what we're looking at, right? Things like that.
Absolutely. Final question, because I think, we've been talking about subjectivity, we've been talking about managing expectations, we've been talking about acceptance criteria. I like to think of recruiting. I'm a former Scrum Master, so I like to think of it as the 3 points of a project management triangle: budget, scope, time. You need one. You need one to be flexible for a really good search. Otherwise, you are potentially in a lot of trouble. At what point is it fair to go back to the hiring team and say, I might need you to be more flexible with what you're looking for. Obviously, if it's too soon, their initial thing is, well, you haven't looked enough. If you spent too much time, you're literally banging your head against the cinder block. And you're like, this is not helping the company. Maybe more of an art versus science question, or maybe it is science. I don't know. We'll see what your thoughts are. But how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I love the triangle, by the way. And I think we always say, hey, you can't have all three, right? You can't have it be fast, high quality, and cheap, right? So those are the way that the recruiting teams and people teams look at it. So ideally, it's a balance, like you said. I think I like to think about it right up front too. How do we want to measure this? Because if we're only going to really be able to realistically balance two and maybe slightly sacrifice one, or not able to optimize all three, where is that? Is it how important is speed? Do we have an initiative, like something a product we're trying to launch? Like what's the gateway on the time? Because everyone wants it, of course, especially in tech, fast is king, right? And queen, like we need fast always. Depending on the time, cheap could be really important, cheaper, right? Like than it is in other times. But you probably make that decision up front. Hey, we're going to spend some money. We're going to take longer to find the best person. We're trying to optimize everything. But if we get down the road, we realize, 60 days in, 90 days in, that's not happening. I mean, I've had searches go on for 9 months, a year, right? And so you definitely are retrenching and making those decisions all the time, right? And those trade offs. So I think it's good I thank you for reminding me of that, because I'm going to bring that back up. And actually, in the search we're going to launch here soon, we're going to talk about that next. So thank you, Amir, for that reminder. One of my favorite like things to talk about, and I forget about it from time to time, but it's always a great illustration of kind of anything we do in tech, right?
Yeah, one thing we started doing. I mean, I come from technology consulting as a part of one of the roles I held, and you're always trying to figure out what could be some issues that come up ahead of time, and you want to document the heck out of it, because CYA is key as a consultant. You got to put it out there. And initially, we started off producing that type of documentation, whether it's executive search or contingent role, because I was like, yeah, I want you to know, if this search doesn't go right, it's going to be these two or three things. And I want to come back and pinpoint it. And I'd send it off thinking I'm doing consulting, and I'll get somebody to sign off on the other side. We all understand. I quickly realized no one in the talent world wanted anything to do with this document. I was like, it's nothing binding. I just want us to all know, these are these are the notes. I just want us to all know this is where we could potentially, go sideways before we start, so that we all have some expectations that, and again, some of the acceptance criteria is what might not work out, and already knowing that and anticipating it. So I still have it on our Google Drive someplace. I still occasionally talk to it with my business partner. I'm like, should we dust this off? Should we try to re-envision this? Because I thought it was a great idea, but no one seemed to like it whatsoever.
Well, hey, I love it. I love the principles of it. I think that I mean, you've spent time in this world, right? When I'm speaking with potential recruiters that we could be working with, or agencies, or even my own team if we're doing it internally, and anyone tells me that they thought this is going to be great or easy or no problem, I can fill this role. Like I know everyone, right? I just bullshit, right? I call bullshit, right? Like tell me what's really going on. And I think this market is changing so much. I mean, there's some dynamics going on out there that is there are plentiful, right? Then CX whatever they might be plentiful right now because of what's happening. Yet they're expensive because this now the CX whatever, it's going to take you a year and you're still going to hire two or three levels down with the organization because generations are retiring. People are tired. They've made a ton of money. They don't want to do it again. So I want that recruiter to tell me what they know about the market. And in some way, that's what you're doing. You're sort of saying, here's the three things that I'm seeing out there that if we get to that point, this could be why. And some of the best recruiters that I work with do that exactly that. And we don't sign anything and say it, but we do have that conversation up front.
Yeah, no,
So
no, I
very
appreciate it. Yeah, no, no, I did realize, my background's a little bit non-traditional, so I did quickly realize that we cover that stuff. It wasn't just as one to one for my consulting days. So I was like, okay, Amir, so this is, you got to adjust a little bit, you got to roll with it. So you've been fantastic. You've shared a great amount of information and knowledge. Somebody probably will have a follow-up question because we can't cover it all. If there is someone that's interested in touching base with you, what's a good way of doing that?
I think LinkedIn is the best way to find me and message me there. And I will, if anyone's a recruiter, especially or in the talent world, I will connect. Right, that is my thing. Either I have to know you, or you're like one of our people. Right, you're sort of the people or talent person. I will definitely accept the connection and happy to always to chat further. So
Awesome. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And if anybody does want to connect, please use that link to find JR on LinkedIn. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Two things. One, I really thought this is a great conversation. I mean, we kind of talked about leadership, but I think actually this is very applicable to almost any level of hiring. Talking about expectation management, talking about acceptance criteria, talking about flexibility in search. I think these are all things that come up in every type of role. So please share this with somebody else that might also find it useful. I think it'd be great. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.